Good evening and welcome to my somewhat sad hobby bench tonight. On the stand, take two. Good evening and welcome to my hobby bench on this somewhat sad day. On the bench today, or the table, I've got my new never run Thunder Tiger GP42 engine. Now I did have this on the stand earlier today, and I was going to attempt to run it today, even though the weather wasn't super conducive to running this engine. But something unfortunate happened when I was trying to actually get it to pop off in the garage, and I thought I'd share with you what happened and what I think might be a remedy for it. So look at, I also found the weak link in this engine. By far the weakest link. So it has this angled needle valve, right, on the carb, and this little black thing here is the fuel inlet, which is a piece of plastic. Now when I got this engine, that fuel inlet was pointed just like it is now, maybe a little bit lower, so it was pointing down. And I was putting the fuel tubing on there in that orientation. I was like, this is a sucky orientation, because it was like really pointed down. So I took a wrench and I loosened this up. And as I loosened this, I moved that, let me see if I can zoom in even more here. I moved that orientation of this fuel inlet up a little bit, or at least try to make it so that it's more straight. I don't know, but if you can see here, it's still very close to the crankcase, and it kind of makes it hard to, get the fuel line on there. But I managed to get the fuel line on there, and I had it primed, and it was 52 degrees in my garage. It was pretty cool, and had a nice fresh Fox RC long glow plug in there that glowed like the sun. Everything was wonderful, and it would not pop over at all. And I started using the lighter fluid trick on it, and I couldn't even get the thing to pop. And I was trying to do it by hand, but the top dead center pinch is so tight. I think I can take this down a little bit. It was so tight that my electric starter wouldn't turn it over. So I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So anyway, long story short, I went to try to rotate this thing down again, because I didn't think I had it that tight, and it ended up breaking this fuel inlet. So I unscrewed it, took this thing off, and now this fuel inlet is broken. Now whether it was cracked when I first got it, I don't know. All I noticed was that it would pull fuel and then it wouldn't hold it. So there was obviously an air leak. So I'm like, well, this sucks, because now I've just completely destroyed this engine. I searched on eBay. I can't just find one of these things. So I'm thinking to myself, well, this just sucks. Lots of people really wanted to see this engine. I was thinking about just giving the thing away to somebody who already has one, and then they can use their own, or maybe somebody's got a spare part. But then I started thinking, I remembered there was this engine that I got a while back that actually had, it wasn't part of the engine, it was just something that somebody had thrown in there, was a needle valve assembly for a 40FP. So I'm sitting there looking for this thing. I'm like, where in the hell is this thing at? So I finally found it. It was in my 40SF ringed engine. And I'm thinking 40FP, Thunder Tiger, pretty similar engines. Maybe, just maybe. Well, the maybe was pretty quickly dismissed, because it's like, they're completely different. However, this thing still does have a threaded portion very similar to this. And I'm probably going to have to zoom in way far to see this. So there is a threaded portion on there that is similar, and I was like, well, I can't tell by just looking at it. And of course, because of this portion here, it doesn't fit into the carb. So I'm like, well, let me test to see if the threads are the same. So I unscrewed this nut that is what tightens it onto the FP engine, and lo and behold, it threads onto this thing perfectly. So I was like, bingo! Now, I have a 40FP engine that is pristine, it's got a few runs on it. I don't need this, necessarily, for that engine. So I started thinking, well, will it just go in there? No, it won't just go in there. The needle valve is longer, or the high-speed needle is longer, and etc. And if you just line these two things up, You know, it's just not there. So I started thinking, well, you know, I do have a Dremel, and if this is, I can't do anything with this engine. I mean, there is a theoretical possibility that I might be able to just find some kind of epoxy or JB weld for plastic or something that might seal that and might make that workable, but I don't have high hopes for that happening. So this could become the sacrificial pig to try to get this engine spared. Now, what would be required for me? I already know that this threaded portion here will thread into this carb, no problem. So what I'm thinking about doing is taking a high-speed needle out, obviously, fixturing it such that, you know, a small vise or something, so that I could cut this with a Dremel. And if I cut just enough of that off, this whole tip here, and leave just enough threads so that I can still thread that in there. Let's see what the pitch angle of these. Yeah, that's a pretty blunt. So the needle valve is not going to be, obviously the high-speed needle is not going to be the same. It looks like it may not work too well in here. It might close it off. I don't know. One is really pointy and one is a little bit more blunt. But you never know. I might get lucky. So if I cut this thing off and thread it in there, there's a possibility that I might still be able to salvage this engine. Possibility. Now, I can't say when I might get around to doing this. This sounds like it's going to be one of those things where it'd be a cold, crappy day outside or whatever, which could be coming up pretty soon. And I'd have to find some way to hold this steady so that I could get a nice straight cut there and cut that off and then make sure I don't have any shavings or anything in there. But see, that's the thing, is that I can't really see too deep in there to see. Oh, here we go. Oh boy, that's hard to see there. Those two holes are not quite the same. I don't know. We'll have to see. The high-speed needles obviously are not identical, but you never know. I might be able to do it. So anyway, that's my kind of sad story about this Thunder Tiger GP42 engine, and I can tell you right now, this thing here is the weakest link of this engine so far, and I've never even run the engine. I can tell you that's the weakest link because the thing broke. It's plastic. Why in the hell would they make this, one of the most critical parts of the engine, make it out of plastic? I mean, this OS design is so much more robust, where it's this one-piece metal thing. You could still have an angled back needle valve, but have a more robust high-speed needle. Now, maybe back in the day, it wasn't a big deal when they were selling these things and they were still in production, and you could get spare parts, but guess what? Now you can't. So I effectively made this thing a really, really pretty looking bush bearing engine doorstop, unless I can make this piece work and fit. So that's going to be another project here, hopefully very soon here. So those of you that have just seen the quick look inside video of this engine, you'll understand why you haven't seen it run yet.